Hey, church fam, we hope you guys are doing well. Especially amidst everything that is going on currently. Kendall and I really just wanted to talk today about what it looks like to share our faith and why we share our faith. And really, there's no better time to point people to Jesus than now. And so even if you look at the Great Commission as Jesus is talking to his disciples, he commissions them off and he says, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And so we are commanded as Jesus' disciples to share our faith and to go and make disciples. And so I want to read from Romans 10, 12 through 15, very briefly, about Paul's commands to the Romans. He says, "For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent?" And so as a sending church, we are called to go and preach the gospel. And as Paul says, Jesus makes no distinction between Jew and Greek. He desires all people to come to know him. Even as you look at Revelation 7:9, all tongues, tribes, and nations gathered around the throne giving praise to Jesus. And so, no better time than now to share our faith, share the gospel, and really be a representation of what Revelation 7:9 is going to look like here on earth. And so Kendall's going to touch a little bit about what it looks like as we share our faith and how we do that in community.
Yeah. So, man, as we are sharing our faith, it's so important to bring them into community. Many times we see this as a next step, but I would argue it's actually part of the first step and something you should already be doing as you are pursuing someone and sharing Jesus. It's a great way for them to see these principles you're sharing lived out, because for many people, especially here in America, they've heard about Jesus, and many even grew up in the church and have walked away because they didn't see it lived out in their lives, in their families. It wasn't tangible for them. It was this thing they did on Sundays and then forgot as soon as they left the church parking lot. And this is why community is such an important part of the disciple-making process. And we can look to our greatest example, Jesus, and how he didn't just sit down and share the message and schedule a few coffee meetups with them. The first thing he did was invite them to join him. Matthew 4:19 says, Jesus says to come, follow me. He brought them into his community. He shared his life with them so that they could see how his faith is lived out, and he taught them along the way. They weren't projects, they were friends and brothers. And as we read the Gospels about their life and community with Jesus, we watch them each grow in their sanctification in ways they wouldn't have been able to do on their own. They had Jesus to look to daily as their example, but they also had each other to learn from as well. And in Matthew 16, when Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do the people say that I am?" Some answer John the Baptist, some answer Elijah. And Jesus says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "Jesus is the Christ." And Jesus praises Peter over the disciples that he knew his true identity. So in that moment, not just Peter was given clarity of who Christ was, but all of his disciples, because they were doing life together. Likewise, we see in just a few verses over, Peter's rebuked in front of everyone for misunderstanding Jesus' work shortly after he was being praised for recognizing his office. So when one was rebuked by Jesus, he did so publicly in the group so that all of them could learn from that mistake and misunderstanding of the gospel. Ephesians 3:17-19 drives this home for us, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. We grow deeper in our understanding of Christ by living in community and learning from each other. Growth is not done in isolation. We grow best when we do it in community with others. So be quick to bring people into community. It's not a next step, it's often the first step. Love you guys.